Hey, welcome back to SharePoint TV. I've got our next set of guests here. Of course, you know, my name is Jeff Fritz, but I'm joined by, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Sesha Mani. I'm a principal PM manager in the Onedrive and SharePoint team.
Okay. And
hi, I am Adriana Wood, and I am a senior program manager in the SharePoint OneDrive team.
So, OneDrive, a little bit about security announcements that came out this morning, and there's some interesting new investments in that space. What things should we take away from the keynote this morning that are important around security and OneDrive looking forward?
Yeah, there are, I would say, as you well have seen in the keynote this morning, there are three key announcements around security. The first one is around sensitivity labels, and we are making a lot of investments in that space. This morning we announced sensitive labels for the protected files. That is one of the very key announcements. And also, as you know, last Ignite we also mentioned about sensitive labels for SharePoint sites. So you can create a site and then apply a sensitive label there as well. Okay. So that was one big announcement. The second major announcement we did today was around expiring automatically the permissions for external access.
Yes.
Yeah, that was another big applause in the keynote this morning for that.
Sure.
And then the third aspect is around ability to rename the sites as well, which is another.
We were just talking about that with with Omar. My gosh, such great applause. It feels like, right to us on the outside, it feels like, oh, I just want to rename that thing. But there's a lot to that.
Exactly.
It's a very fun feature to report on.
So those are the main three features. In addition, we actually also announced, and Adriana will talk about it in a few minutes, is around general availability of SharePoint multi-geo. So
yeah, that's important, right? When I start integrating and I want to work with folks who are in Canada, right, or in Europe, they're outside the States. Well, there's different hosting requirements for data, data sovereignty regulations that I need to be aware of. And SharePoint will help us out with that now.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, we announced OneDrive multi-geo general availability about a year ago. Now it's a very complex and hard problem from the engineering perspective. And we worked very hard on it. Now we're actually very glad and thrilled to announce perfect timing for SharePoint conference, the general availability for SharePoint multi-geo.
It's like we planned it or something. Oh my goodness. Now, actually, is that something that we could take a look at in a screenshot or something here on your machine?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Maybe let me actually show it to the screen.
Yep, can we share that? There we go.
Okay.
And while Sesha is getting logged into the multi-geo tenant, the main takeaway with multi-geo is that we have multinationals that have data residency obligations.
Absolutely.
And that really means that certain data of certain users must be hosted in the country where the user resides. As you know, when you sign up for a tenancy in the past, your tenancy was provisioned only in one place. So with multi-geo, you have the capability of expanding your tenancy, and you can see here the geolocations map to any geolocation where you may have data residency needs.
It's right there over your shoulder. It's right over there. Okay, so North America, Europe, Middle East, Asia. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to add an additional geolocation, it's actually as simple as you click on Add Location, and here are the choices available for you. So for example, I can select Australia, Canada, or France, UK, India, Japan, Korea, you name it. And in the future, any additional Office 365 data centers that we expand to, we'll also make it available for you as part of multi-geo rollout as well. So the key point is, it's not about just today what you have, it's also about down the road for 3 to 5 years as your company is growing multinationally, how you are set for the future as well by just onboarding into the SharePoint multi-geo.
Oh my gosh. Now, are these organizations, are these countries chosen because they have data sovereignty policies, or because, well, that's where we've got a data center? Yeah. Or is it a little bit of both?
It is a little bit of both. Okay. Of course, to be able to provision anywhere, you first need a data center, right? Yeah. However, the planning around our data centers is often centered around what data sovereignty may exist in those countries. Okay. And we have, regions, and we have go locals. If you look at some of our go locals, you have Canada, Japan. Those are countries, and few others. So those are countries that have very strict regulatory frameworks that require specific housing of data.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, we need to figure out how to get data stored in Antarctica, because I like to keep my data
cool.
Keep it fresh.
Keep it fresh, yes.
A little icy.
So, Now, if I just added another region on here, if I wanted to add India on, does it just light up that area of the map and there's India added into the mix?
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's as simple as, let's say, for example, India I wanted to add. All you have to choose here is what's the name of the namespace you want for that URL. Because as you know, each geolocation, you can have a SharePoint URL. So here I'm going to simply select, let's say, Contoso Bank IND. And this IND, which is basically a 3-letter acronym that actually specifies what location that particular data is going to be resided. And it's important because to decide for individual users, let's say Sesha belongs to US and then Adriana belongs to Europe. This is how you nominate them. Sesha is part of US, which is NAM, and then Adriana is part of Europe, which is EUR.
Gotcha.
So that's how you configure them, and you just click add, and then it will provision the site location for you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, when we're working with those different sites, whether it's Adriana in Europe and Sesha in India, Jeff over here in the States, how do I cross? Right, if I need to start sharing things across geos, how do I work with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I can explain this one. So in a multi-geo tenancy, the representation of the tenant is an AED. So the multi-geo tenant has a single AED instance. And because it is a single AED instance, all of the users and groups are hosted there. So you can seamlessly share and collaborate across your tenancy, no matter where the content is or what kind of user you are. If you're Jeff in Europe and Sesha is in India and I am in the US or however it might be.
Okay, that just makes sense. My gosh. It's like we planned it out again.
Yeah, I think seamless is what describes our feature.
And being able to move things back and forth, even though you need that separation, tremendous capabilities. It's going to make a lot of people's jobs a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Now, what are some of the other big announcements that are coming along throughout the rest of the week that we should be tracking? What features should we be keeping our eyes on?
Yeah, the other two I would call out, like I said, first is on the labels. So you'll see a lot more announcements coming up in this week on that. So here I am in the Security and Compliance Center for Microsoft 365. And it's simply, you can create these labels. For example, here I have General, Top Secret, Confidential, and then I have one for M&A Legal, Top Secret as well. So the idea here is, for a whole enterprise, for your organization, you create a simple 3 or 4 necessary sensitivity labels. That way, so I'm going to now switch gear as an end user. Just quickly show you. So here I am as an end user, Jeff, logging into my SharePoint home experience. And when I click on create a site, it's going to offer me a choice of what sensitivity I want. So let me go ahead and pick a site name here. So let's call it banking strategy.
Okay.
And let's go ahead. And if you notice here, there is an option now available for sensitivity. So in other words, when I'm creating a site, I know I'm creating it for this particular purpose. And if I'm creating it for, let's say, a strategy site, I want to actually name it as our sensitivity label set as confidential, for example. So that's how simple it is from an end user perspective. He can immediately set the appropriate sensitivity of the site. From the security perspective, behind the scene, the fact you've chosen confidential, what are the policies now we are applying for that particular label? For example,
goes with that?
Exactly. So here I am as a confidential label. You can see there are several policies like encryption, content marking, endpoint data loss prevention, sites and group settings, and then also auto labeling. These are several policies now is tied into that label. So from a security perspective, these are super, super critical. Let's take one example. Here I have sites and group settings is one of the policy that I'm setting. Every confidential resource that I have in my enterprise, I want to say by default, they are all private, which makes perfect sense, right? Because why would you want your confidential or top secret site to be public for anyone come and join? Rather, you want to say by default, it's always private. Also, second of all, you can select whether do you want to allow external users to come and collaborate in this particular resources or not. That's the other policy I can set. Then third of all, another important policy is what happens if somebody is trying to access the site from their personal devices, let's say from their home computer or from a shared devices that they use, what policy you want.
Their mobile device.
Exactly. So these are all unmanaged devices, right? So what do you want to happen? What's the level of experience they should have? So you can say, I want to either completely block it, so that's why you have block access, or you can say, I want to give them limited access so that they get their work done, but they cannot take away the data from that site collection itself. So you can block downloads and the prints and so on with that.
Nice.
Okay?
All right.
So that is another key announcement is coming up in this case, sensitivity label. To take it one step further, in that security space.
Yeah.
We're also now enabling support for protected files within SharePoint Online. So let me explain what that means.
Okay.
So here I am, I can actually turn on what I call the encryption policies for that label as well. So imagine I have a top secret label, and I can go ahead and create the corresponding label with the specific permissions. So if I have a top secret document, that is only available for these particular users. So let's say I'm going to select here user Jeff, who's one of our legal department user. I can select him, I can simply click add, and then now any top secret document, just for example, is available only for Jeff. Of course, if you have a senior leadership team, you can create a group around it and then attach that security group as part of this label as well. So with just one setup, you are able to configure what is the corresponding security policies for that label itself. From the end user perspective, the only thing I have to select is just the label that I have to select.
Right. This is a top secret, and all those permissions are granted appropriately. All the constraints around interactions are all enforced.
Enforce itself, exactly,
Nice.
exactly.
Nice.
Now the other key I think I want to call out is this labels that you saw, I showed you in the site collections, how it is available at the time of site.
Sure.
But guess what? Even when you are creating a document in Word, PowerPoint, Excel, the same.
It flows down into the app?
Exactly.
Oh, now you're
Exactly.
talking. All right.
Exactly.
All right.
So now here I am, I'm going to create a document, right? And typically when I create a document, I know I'm going to create for this purpose. So in this case,
Sure.
I'm creating it for, let's say, mergers and acquisition strategy document, right?
Okay.
And as you can see on the top, I have the option of the same list of sensitivity labels.
Look at there.
So I can basically go ahead and select, let's say, M&A legal top secret as my label. The moment I selected it, it immediately puts a header for me. It puts a watermark for me at the middle, and also at the very end, you can see it is showing me the footer as well. So I can zoom it in for you a little bit here. So this actually shows you that just by selecting one label, you're basically protecting this document. Now, if I'm going ahead and then let's say pasting some information here. So I'm going to copy in some information. I'm going to save this document. Let's give it a name. And I'm going to, just for as a regular user, you normally save it within your local folder.
Sure.
And typically, let's say you are saving it here. But I then realized, as our security admin said, I need to move this file over to SharePoint Online because SharePoint Online is our
It's where you want it to be so you can share it.
Share it, exactly.
Yes.
So now, if I go ahead and close this document, which is now sitting in my local drive, but I'm going to move it out to one of my site collection here. So let me go ahead and simply drag and drop. So this is the document I just created, right? And I'm going to go ahead, and I believe this guy right here. I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop to this document library and just watch what happens. That's the protected top secret document. But
Right.
guess what I'm doing? I'm actually putting it in the site collection mistakenly as public
You put it in the
room.
wrong place.
Exactly. But because that document has the label M&A legal top secret, you can see it right here at the bottom. Let me zoom it in for you.
Yeah.
It picked up the label and said this document is actually meant as a top secret document, a strategy document.
Right.
That means only people that are allowed access for that particular label can open the document.
So it's being filtered at the top level, even though it isn't in the proper place.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Of
got
course,
it.
if you wanted to, let's say you realized your mistake, now you want to move this file out to an actual site collection, you can pick that particular file, and then we already have an option called move to, so you can simply move the file to the right location. But the idea here is, even if the users make mistakes to put them in the wrong place, the top secret documents are now protected. As well.
Right. We're still allowing them to have their intent. And we're going to take that extra step to protect appropriately,
Absolutely.
even though you didn't do exactly what you meant to.
And to do it, exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's uploading and pushing the documents around there. Men in Black uses SharePoint confirmed. Okay, I see that chat room. I see what you're saying there. So, Adriana, what else is coming up this week we need to keep an eye on?
Well, we're having a session on multi-geo, and there will be some special announcements on Thursdays and some demos that you guys might have not seen yet. So please attend our multi-geo session. And also, talking on the topic of labels, we are also having a label session also on Thursday. Thursday is a popular day for us.
Fantastic.
And you will get to see deeper demos on some of the things that we have mentioned so far. So a lot of exciting things. And of course, site rename, there will also be sessions this week.
Of course, my gosh. So multi-geos, it's a big deal. We already talked a little bit about that. A lot of stuff that folks, if they're here at the event, got to make sure you check into on Thursday. And of course, we'll have those videos available later on the website for folks to be able to check out.
Yeah.
Now, what else are you going to be demonstrating this week?
Yeah.
That you may want to share with some of our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I saw that smile. You're like, oh,
we have a lot of demos for you.
I was just waiting for you because
this
is one of the other biggest announcement we're making this week is the automatic revocation of the permissions for the external users.
So this is a problem that I help run the MVP Summit, and I've got on Teams. I've invited some other folks to help with MVP Summit 2018, not this year's, last year's, and it's still hanging out there in Teams, and these folks still have access. I love the idea of automatically revoking their access after the event occurs, and I don't have to think about it and go, all right, I'm done, go clean up all the nonsense.
Exactly.
How does this work?
So the way, is exactly designed to satisfy the problem they just pointed out.
Okay.
At your Office 5 level, or this particular case, SharePoint tenant level, you can set up how many days you want these external users to have access to these resources by default, right?
Okay.
So here I am setting it up for 30 days, right? So that's really the default that I have here, so that any external user or guest user who is now accessing my SharePoint site will have 30 days from the day they first access that particular site.
Gotcha.
Okay? That's what you are configuring here. It's simply configurable. You can say 7 days or 60 days, depending on your security portfolio, you can configure it here. Once you configure it here, now let's say if I go back to site collection, I'm going to share a document with one of my external user. So let's go ahead and share a document. Now this particular document, let me go ahead and select specific people because I want to share with externally somebody, right? And then type it in the user that I wanted to share with, Jeff, so who happens to be one of my colleagues that I've been working with. So I'm going to go ahead and share, and you can see immediately it gives me a hint that I'm sharing with the user from outside the organization. But I know I need to collaborate with him, so let me go ahead and click send here. So it's going to send a mail to Jeff, and Jeff will receive an email with the link to the document that he can access it. But the beautiful part here is, if I go to the same site collections view, here I'm seeing that Jeff has been invited to this site collection. And if I zoom it in a bit, you can see Jeff from Outlook.com is having access, and his access is good until 6/20/2019.
Okay.
Right? So that's basically 30 days period that he is having access to the site collection.
Okay.
But let's say you decided, I'm done with the partnership. I actually no longer want Jeff to have access to it. Simply you can select Jeff and then click expire now.
Sure.
And then immediately it instantly revokes access for that user for that site collection itself. So that's the idea here, where you set the tenant level policy and you can decide based on, as a site owner for that particular site, if you're done with that partnership, you can revoke access immediately.
Okay.
Or if you want to extend the access, of course, there's an option here for extending the expiration. You can extend that as well.
So I saw the relative expiration dates, right? You've got 30 days. You've got a week to take a look and work with this. In a scenario where we have a fixed event, right? We're doing the product launch on this date. We have SharePoint conference here in May. If I want to say, you know what, I want to expire that on June 1st.
Got it.
Right? Is there a way to do absolute expiration?
We don't have that today in
Okay.
the part of the V1, but definitely that is something we are looking at as we expand on this particular horizon. Like you can say at the per site collection, I'm creating a site for, let's say, MVP Summit, but I want that site to be available only for, let's say, 60 days.
Sure.
So at the site collection level, we can bring down the same security control as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could probably select them all with the multi-checkbox here and do the extend expiration and set that appropriately so that it's June 1st.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
You can do that too. Yeah.
Very cool stuff. So that's the expiration of those credentials. Now, somebody had a question earlier about private channels, and that was something we announced just a little bit ago, right?
Yeah, so that is something at the team's experience. We have announced, I believe, preview, an MVP preview for that earlier. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, folks were curious about how that works, fitting into the whole picture here. Definitely, if we're expiring folks' credentials, it sounds like you're going to be able to do something similar there as well, right?
Yeah, it's a very similar security model where you create a channel which is private under a given parent channel, but then you say that channel is private only between Sesha and Adriana and Jeff, for example. So you can confine who are allowed to access that particular channel.
Gotcha.
Then behind the scene, the corresponding SharePoint site, which is got associated with the private channel, will inherit the same permission model as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, we saw a little bit about multi-geo. We're seeing a little bit here about the user expiration.
Yeah.
Now, are there other security pieces here we should take a look at while we've got folks watching online?
I can mention the two other things. In fact, tomorrow I'm having a deep dive session on these security features.
Okay.
But I'm happy to share with you right now itself.
Sneak peek?
Yeah, quick look at it.
We're gonna blow the top off this.
One is around the DLP, data loss prevention policies associated aspect. And the idea there is today we can configure the list of rules and say if these rules or these criteria met, then flag that site, that particular file as a sensitive file, right? And then you block external access for it. But
makes sense.
The challenge is, in order for the DLP engine to kick in and to flag that file as a sensitive file, it usually takes time. For example, between 15 minutes to an hour or 2 hours.
Why? It's got to index and find it.
Exactly. You got it. And also depending on how many security policies, DLP policies that you have configured, right? So if you have many policies configured, and it will take some time to
got to resolve everything.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now what happens during that time, 15 minutes to a couple of hours, it's possible that users can go and share that particular file with externally, and it's a possibility for leakage of the data during that time, right? To solve that particular problem, we are introducing a feature called DLP block external access by default.
Okay.
What that means is if somebody uploads a new file or create a new file in SharePoint Online, you can now immediately treat that file blocking access for external access right away, no matter where you created the file, no matter where you uploaded the file, until the DLP engine comes in and scans the document and then says whether it is sensitive or non-sensitive.
And then approves it for access.
For access, exactly.
Very cool.
So you can see we are thinking about expiring access for external users, or also thinking about how do we ensure that the data is not accidentally get leaked even during that window of small 15 minutes to an hour, couple of hours.
Sure.
Right.
Sure, gosh.
And similar to that DLP, there's another associated feature, which is if it is a sensitive file, you can also now have a condition that says do not allow anonymous sharing for those sensitive files.
Of course, my gosh. And so even before you look at those sensitivity labels, being able to turn that on by default at a site level, that feels like the right thing to do.
Exactly, yeah,
so,
that's true.
I love the idea of sensible defaults like that, right? By default, we've got a sensitive site here. Let's make sure nobody has access to stuff appropriately.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about helping the end user, because the end user might not know exactly what is sensitive, when to access, especially the anonymous sharing one. As soon as you try to access that document and share it anonymously, you get a message from your admin telling you, hey, this document cannot be shared, and whatever explanation they've decided to choose for the user.
And gosh, I'm one of those folks who, when I'm writing a Word document or I'm working in an Excel spreadsheet, I'm just real quick hitting Control-S to finish things off. I'm not looking at and thinking about
the policies.
The policies and the labels. It's when I get the yellow bar that pops up or something that says, "Oh, you're not abiding by a policy." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Now I got to go and figure everything out again. But by setting it up front, now I'm abiding by policy right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's good.
Yeah.
That is real good. Did anyone else just hit Control-S instinctively in the chat room? No.
Just apply your policies before you do it.
That's right. You're scorned. And right, SharePoint now automatically saves everything back from the Office apps. I love that. Oh my gosh. So good. Do we have any concerns with security in OneDrive we need to talk about?
There is one aspect because first of all, whatever I mentioned today, all the features on security applicable to OneDrive as well.
Okay.
So for example, the sensitivity label that I talked about.
Sure.
In Office clients, when you apply the label, but then you are now uploading a document to OneDrive, the same sensitivity will automatically honored in OneDrive as well. So in other words, even if you upload a top secret document to your OneDrive mistakenly, which is not your intention, but still we will ensure that the permission is protected in that OneDrive aspect.
Gotcha.
There's another aspect in OneDrive we are looking at, which is perhaps you may have situations in your enterprises or organizations, you have collaborators coming in, but you don't want to give them OneDrives. And also, you don't want them to have access to OneDrives at all, because OneDrives are meant for your personal files, and people may accidentally share something with those collaborators. So we have a new feature, it's called OneDrive Restricted Access, where you can now configure a list of users in your organization, these collaborators that I just mentioned, and then say any users from that particular group are not allowed to access OneDrive or have OneDrive in your organization. So the idea is that even if somebody accidentally shared their OneDrive with that particular list of users, you are still protected. It will block them.
Nice.
This is many of the big organizations actually have asked for exactly these kind of controls. So we're looking at how do we help them deploy OneDrive securely, at the same time take care of some of these regulatory controls that they have to put in place.
Okay. All right. So as we wrap up here, we get to the end of our time together. Looking forward, what are some action items that folks should have? You know, when they go home, they get back into their office. What should they try out with their SharePoint install?
There are two things I would say. First of all, call to action is we have a single point for all of our security and compliance features for SharePoint and OneDrive. It is aka.ms/SharePoint-security.
Okay. Can we put that link in the chat room?
So that will be one single portal that I would strongly recommend folks to always check it out, bookmark it, so that you always see what's the upcoming or what's the roadmap features that we have. We'll be announcing it in that particular page.
Okay.
The second one, there are some previews we are announcing in this in this week. And if you are interested in some of those preview features, for example, I talked about sensitivity labels.
Yes.
It's coming up as preview. I also mentioned the expiration, automatic expiration of the external users. And then there are 3 or 4 other features we're also announcing this week as previews. If you are interested in any of those previews, again, a simple URL is aka.ms/SPC19 security previews.
Gotcha.
That is a single URL, and you can go to that URL and express your interest to participate in that preview. So SPC19 security previews.
There it is in the chat room.
That's right.
Cool. Thank you so much. And Adriana, is there something that you would call to action to tell folks make sure they check out?
Yeah.
Signing up for previews is a big deal, but is there anything that you want to?
So my call to action would be, if you are part of a multinational company and you have data residency obligations, please check out the multi-geo session. Begin planning what data centers you might need your data on and what workforces you have. We have a lot of capabilities in that space, whether it is with OneDrive, sites, and to geolocate your content, as well as to apply specific policies per geolocation. We know many of you that are having sites in particular regions have very specific policy needs for those regions. So we have controls that are individual per geo.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This was
Thank
great.
you.
I learned a lot about multi-geo and security for SharePoint. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
And I hope you join us in about another 15 minutes. We'll have our next guest coming back here on SharePoint TV.